Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a fitness coach, political nerd, and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Delsy Sandoval, a Guatemalan-American licensed therapist and passionate creativity advocate. Together, we're here to uplift our community through powerful conversations with changemakers, creatives, and healers.
Each week on the pod, we talk politics, culture, and personal development. Listeners call Tamarindo the Advocacy and Self-Love Podcast. Vámonos!
Let's start the show!
Hey, Tamarindo listeners. Hey, Delsy. How's it going?
Hola, hola.
So what has been on your mind? What is your ¿Qué pasa? What have you been up to? What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What's your vibe?
You know what? I have to say I'm feeling kind of just in a grateful space. And I know that I say this a lot, but you're catching me on a good day because as you know, Brenda, been going through a lot of medical issues lately, and I'm sure listeners can probably relate to what it's like to go on a kind of a journey of figuring out what's going on with your body. And for a couple of days there, I was starting to feel maybe like anxious and maybe a little sad about the things that I was experiencing. But then I started really thinking about it more and thinking about how much support I have and how people have been like really stepping up to help me, including, you, who I think has been, so supportive of me. And it's just been a beautiful experience to really see how surprising people are in their level of empathy and care. And so today I found myself in like a space of gratitude, and kind of also very militant. Like, I'm like, no, I'm getting to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what I mean?
Well, yes. I'm so proud of, like, as I shared with you, and maybe the listeners haven't heard, but I know that you've been very, like, adamant, like you said, trying to get to the bottom of it. And, like, I think so many of us are not attuned with our body, or tend to just, like, maybe even culturally, just be like, oh, esto nada pasa, like, no pasa nada, you're going to be fine. So I think it's really, you're modeling what we all need to do, and that's really to take care of our bodies and listen to our bodies. And I'm so glad that you're getting the type of care where people are listening to you, because you hear so much of that not happening. And I love that you're reframing of being grateful for that. And like I said, I'm hoping for you that you get the answers that you need, the care that you continue to get the care that you need, and that you feel great every day. That's what I'm hoping for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I want to say, Brenda, that, one thing I'm realizing through this process, and it's something I'd maybe talk more about in future episodes, is like how much misinformation I have regarding health. And I thought that I was someone who had fairly good levels of education around what is healthy and what isn't healthy. And I'm sort of starting to understand that, like, maybe I have some habits that aren't healthy that I developed as a result of watching what I thought was health news or health information, right? And so it's been an interesting journey, and I'd love to talk more about that as this kind of evolves and I learn a little more.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so we'll be looking for some additional voices to help us navigate that. I think that's great. All right, so stay tuned, listeners, for us diving into that. In fact, I'm just like coming up with it now. But if there's any questions that listeners have around this topic, like the how do we get the right information about our health, whatever is on your mind, send it over to us. It's been fun to, when we can, incorporate answering listener questions. Or if you know an expert that you think could add value to this conversation, just a reminder for everyone, you can always reach us at contact@tamarindopodcast.com, and we would love to just hear from the listeners. So thank you for letting us in on what's been on your mind. What's been on my mind, and I know folks are going to be listening to this a little bit later, but right now, this week, Jeff and I have been watching a lot of the DNC, a lot of the speeches at the convention, and it's been a little bit energizing, right? It's been very positive. Oprah came and spoke, and hearing, listened to AOC's speech, listening to President Obama, of course, Michelle Obama, Tim Walz last night. It's been very just and re-energizing. At the same time, of course, what the voices that are missing, right? We're not hearing from Palestinian Americans. We're not hearing with the vigor that we might want the enthusiasm for a ceasefire. We've seen some ugly things like some protesters wanting to be at the convention and having a sign asking for a ceasefire, and then it being covered by other folks with their posters, things that are icky. So I think it just shows how the Democratic group, it's so many different thoughts and voices under one camp, and it's why it's so difficult to get anything done on our end, but it still feels, at least for the most part, mostly unified, mostly energized, and I'm feeling very optimistic about our chances in November. So just kind of capturing a little bit of that that energy, and hopefully it carries through all the way through the election. So that's what's been on my mind.
I agree. And I have to say, Brenda, I don't know what your reaction is to this, but seeing so many members of previous Trump administrations and, active Republicans speaking for Kamala Harris and talking a little bit about their experience working with Trump, I was actually really blown away by the courage of that, in considering the two-party system that we have that is so culturally ingrained, to be able to kind of say, like, listen, I think I made a mistake last time, and I want to put this out there because I care about the country as a whole, whether or not I agree with your party. I was really blown away by that, and whatever their motivations are for doing that, which I hope are all good, it is a good example for all of us about, really paying close attention to some of the policies and things that are going on in your own party, and being able to be critical of that and be a critical thinker. So
especially when it's literally the democracy at stake.
Yes.
Like we might have some policy differences that are serious within our party, but we're not talking about fundamentally changing our country, which is what's happening on the other side. Yeah. So yes, lots to keep in mind. All right, so shifting gears today, I'm excited that we're going to have a friend of the pod. She's back again. It's Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodríguez, here to speak about her new book. It's called Tías and Primas, on knowing and loving the women who raise us. So this is I enjoyed this book. I know both of us have copies of this book. We've been able to dive in. And one question that I have, just to kind of get us to think about the themes in this book, as we come of age, and especially those of us that are working hard to deepen our understanding of how societal pressures have oppressed women, and especially women of color, I wonder, and also in reading this book, have you, with your adult lens, with this informed lens, and continuing to get informed lens, have you looked back at tias, primas, or other family members in your life with a little bit of a different point of view?
100%. And I have to say that this book, one of the things that it's really good at is helping to put that into perspective for me. Because the way that Prisca talks about kind of the labels, the way that women are labeled and how that becomes their whole identity, and it's kind of used as a teaching tool in many ways to kind of almost like teach you these oppressive rules. Like, if it's not explicitly said, you get the gist of what you're supposed to do or not do based on how they're talking about other women, right?
It still informs
Exactly. And so, yes, I've been able to kind of think through the women in my family and what labels were put on them when I was a kid, and maybe how I felt about that then, which was often like trying to people please and trying to please my family and be like, oh yeah, that one's the la loca, right? And that one's the one that that one's the one that she's like desarreglada and whatever these labels were. I kind of was following along, and as I got older, and especially now, I'm looking back at those like, this is not only was this damaging to that person and their experience in the family, but damaging to me. And damaging in a really deep way, I think, because I received the message loud and clear that I was to behave in a very specific way if I was to be respected in the family. as respected as a woman could be in the culture that we're in, right? And so just like there are so many beautiful things that I love about being Guatemalan, there are also aspects of the incredible amount of rules, behavioral rules, that I think I still struggle to unlearn and process today, Brenda.
Yeah, I mean,
100%.
all of us, right? We're all learning,
Yeah.
learning as and unlearning. And I think you did an excellent job of sort of capturing some of the themes that are discussed here, and in so doing, I mean, also realizing even though the rules that continue to oppress us, and maybe recognizing how they were modeled and reinforced by the way that women talked about other women, we can recognize that, and also recognize that these same women were also part of, oppressed in this system. And that's what I like about this book, is that each chapter ends as a bit of a love letter to these different women, and extends that empathy even for the women that we may not even have liked at the time, right? It
Yes.
extends a little bit of empathy and understanding, and exactly as you said, because we can see how this impacted us by extending that grace and empathy to those women. In a way, we're extending that empathy and grace to ourselves. So lots going on. So y'all, we can't tell you how much we loved this book. And now we're going to just hear directly from Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodríguez to hear a little bit more about the process of writing this book, a little bit about ghost stories. It's a fun interview. So let's hear from her now. Welcome, Prisca. It is so wonderful to have you back on Tamarindo. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. It's been a while since last book.
Yes, I know. It's been a whirlwind, and probably a lot of research and work for you to get this new book out. So today we're going to talk about Tías and Primas, on knowing and loving the women who raised us. Wonderful book, wonderful cover to the book. I just finished a lot of it. I got to say, I'm not all the way done, but I got through many chapters of this book. And I was sort of like imagining what it might have been like to write this book. This is what I picture. I picture it's a meditation on the tías and primas that fit these archetypes, right? These archetypes. And then kind of thinking about the traits that make that archetype. And then peeling back and thinking about what are those underlying forces that sort of make this woman. And in doing that, I think there's, at least in reading these chapters, there's sort of like a tenderness on how to approach these women. And because so many of these characters, these women that are in our lives, I think many of us can relate to different aspects of all of them. It sort of invites us to be tender with ourselves. So that's my imagination of how it might have been like to write this book. But I want to, of course, hear from you. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, after the first book, thought, like, that's it, right? I have nothing else to contribute to the world. And I was kind of okay with that. But as I was thinking, books just appear sometimes. Books tell you when they want to be written. I really believe that. And so it was the summer of 2022, and I had talked to my mom about something. And my mom is very like, she doesn't just tell you something, she guides as her daughters through stuff. And she just gives warnings and talks shit about people, and just like, she just moves through the world. Like, I hear her voice in therapy is a thing that I talk about. I hear her voice a lot. Like, she's very much like my biggest critic in my head too, because of how I've heard her critique other women in our family, as a way of rearing me, of teaching me what to do better, what to learn from. And so, yeah, the book just kind of came, and I was like thinking about this particular tia that I grew up with, who's towards the end of the book is the queer tia, and the ways that she talked about her and how much I loved her. And so how much, as I've learned, homophobia, terms like that I didn't have access to in my little brain, as I'm hearing my mom talk badly about this person, how much I've had to reclaim narratives that I grew up hearing as well-intentioned lessons. And it was really this place of like, I want to write her a letter. This particular tia, I want to write her a letter. And it started with that. It was me writing to her that I love her, that I miss her, that I'm so happy she's happy. And from that came the whole book. It was just like, what are these other tias that I grew up seeing and learning from and hearing about through other women in my family? And how do I get to pour into them? It's almost like a healing practice for me too. Like, I see so much of myself. Like, my inner critic is my mom. And so hearing mi mommy's voice be like, I don't be too loud. You know? And so when I think of my loudest tia, and I'm like, no, be as loud as possible, take up as much space. So it was that. It was healing to me because so much of me are these women. And it turned out to be 20 of them. So
Yeah, I can imagine it's a very healing process. And of course, the process of healing that thing can be very heavy and take a toll. So I appreciate you kind of giving us a glimpse of what it was like. And of course, you mentioned that it felt like writing a letter to that tia, because a lot of it felt like a love letter to each one of these women. It really comes through as a love letter. And, throughout the book, too, there's a lot of quotes from feminist writers. And because a lot of us observe you on Twitter and other places, we've kind of been part of this process of you doing the research, right? You're like, oh, I remember reading your tweets and just like, oh my gosh, the books I have to read, like this is so fascinating. And you're really diving into a lot of different resources as you paint these pictures. And I know there's a wonderful bibliography. The folks got to check that all out. But if you were to say, here's like 2 or 3 required readings, what are some of the ones that stand out?
So I'm so glad I brought out stuff, because I was thinking about that before we sat down to chat. Because this is sort of mirroring a lot of like feminist lit that I read. It's just making it accessible. And it's all through being a trade book. Academic books stay in academic libraries. So being a trade book, it's going to be found in like your public library, which is like a huge plus. And it was also making like how do I get you to start reading, to be prepared to read these other books? So the shock that happened to me in academia was I didn't have like a transition to academic books. I just went from loving to read fiction, and then they threw me into academic books, and I had to read them out loud. I had to walk around reading them out loud because I would fall asleep. They were so dense and hard to read.
Right,
so
right.
It's almost like this is the transition book. This is the book to get you prepared for books like, so this is written by a Latina, and it's called Women Who Run with Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Women Archetypes. And it's Clarissa Pincola Estes. So it's a Latina writer, and you could see it has like all my tabs, but she talks about like the ugly duckling archetype, just different types of archetypes and communities and why they are the way that they are. And it's a great book, but I had this for probably 6 years before I actually was like, okay, I gotta read it. Because it's dense and it's hard and it's heady, and it just can be really, like I said, there's no transition to academic books. There's just like the deep end. Another one for me was Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, and like that also. And she has like the widow. She has these very archetypes of like the matriarch, the young woman, and she goes through these. And it's what a lot of these feminists do also is that I think what we don't know about feminist lit is that a lot of these feminist writers can also be they can be trans exclusive.
Mm-hmm, right.
And so being a woman is very much related to a body part. And so what I wanted to do was kind of claim these narratives as make them like, no, this could be your tia who sees ghosts could be a trans woman. Like your tia who like understands the world in binaries might be cis, but there are other like your queer tia. I wanted to like I wanted to invite more of us into the conversation when thinking about these women. And another book that I really liked was Radical Feminist Therapy by Bonnie Burstow. It blew my mind, and now I talk to therapists, I'm like, you should read it.
Yeah.
Because it talks about specifically like women how we're raised in like a mother-father household. So like a hetero household. A lot of us are raised. I don't know if this happened to you, but my dad, I was picked as his favorite in my household. And as his favorite, I almost came in between them. Like he would tell me things he did to her. And he would tell me things that she would do to him that was unfair. And I was put in the middle to like defend him. I was put in the middle to like, and like I thought I was the chosen one. And so
like you were his confidant in some ways. Yeah.
And I felt so adult and grown up and so special. And when I understood that it really was just creating this huge divide between my mom and I, and further isolating her in a very not healthy relationship that they had, you sort of don't know what to do with that wound, because you're like, wait, I thought I was special. I thought he picked me. I thought it was good. And then it turned out that I was just used for something he hadn't processed yet about his trauma. So that book gives a lot of language for if you have that type of relationship as a girl with a dad who really was like, you're my favorite.
Okay, I got to pick up that book as you're describing. I'm just thinking about sort of like a switch being when you're little, daddy's little girl. And like, I think I did have those feelings of the favorite, and then it just kind of switching.
Yeah.
Like a switch. Yeah.
And
so it'd be really neat to unpack that. Yeah. It'd be really neat to unpack that. And well, this isn't therapy, but I'm going to pick up that book because how that carries on to adulthood.
Yes.
Okay, so you a couple things. One is because you mentioned it, and this is an interesting archetype because it's like the tia who sees ghosts, because you're not finding that in other places and other feminist books. In that chapter, you talk about you seeing a ghost, and I've been really into ghosts lately. It's so funny you mentioned a trans woman that sees ghosts. I'm really into a podcast called Ghosted that's hosted by a Latina trans woman that's all about ghosts. I love that podcast, and there's way too many examples of ghosts for anybody to doubt their existence. So I'm just kind of curious about your encounter. There was a ghost in your house?
Yeah. And I actually got it confirmed by a neighbor. So I like weed. That shouldn't be a secret. And I was home alone for a week. My partner was traveling for work at this time in a consulting firm. And so like, I'm pretty terrified of things like being alone at night and sleeping. And so like the alarm was on away, so I closed the door of the bedroom. The two dogs were inside with me, and I had put like what my grandma's alarm system is. You put like a pan on the handle of the door because if somebody tries to get in, it falls off and it's really loud. So I had that in one door. I had a vacuum cleaner in another door. So I was just like, I feel good. I'm gonna smoke some weed and go to sleep so that I don't like keep thinking about it. So I get really high and I go to sleep, and then I wake up in the middle of the night and my dog Randy is sitting up and he's being pet by this man who's wearing like a white flowy shirt. And the man looks at me because I get up like,
oh my God,
at my hip. Yeah. And I just see this man petting my dog and I'm like, no. And I just like go back down and I fall asleep again. I'm just like, I'm not dealing with it. And it turns out one of my neighbors, one time we went out to buy crystals, of course, together. And she was like, have you met our neighborhood ghost, David? And I was like, what do you mean? And she started describing him, and it was the man that I saw. And she was like, oh yeah, I think he died in the area a long time ago before the houses built, because he does move throughout the houses. And a few of the women have talked about seeing this man. And I was like, interesting.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You met David, and David likes dogs.
Yeah, my dog loved him.
That is wild. Well, thanks for indulging. I was left craving like, okay, but tell me more about this ghost. And okay, you also see yourself in a lot of the women that you write about. One little side note. I mean, you mentioned a lot seeing yourself in your mom, right, and being compared to your mom, and your mom is the the dignified tia. Another word that comes to mind, but tell me if this isn't the right word, but something that I know I've heard family members use in describing women that are like this is sangrona, and And another person you mentioned in the book is Jessica Salgado. And a few posts ago, she had a post about kind of reclaiming sangrona, like, yeah, I'm sangrona. And I really enjoyed that. I felt very empowered by that. So does that resonate at all, the idea of sangrona and dignified?
Yeah, I didn't grow up with the word sangrona used. I think it might be regional for y'all. So, and Jessica's around a lot of in LA.
Yes, and she talks about that, right? About how, yeah, I'm Salvadorian, but girl, I'm in Los Angeles. You know, I'm gonna say some Mexican things.
But like another word that I had for her was judgmental. But it was sort of like a little bit sour, a little bit la que tiene algo que decir de todo. So yeah, very much that feels resonant. And it is also like there's been times in my life where I've seen my mom through this lens of like overbearing and too judgmental. And if I really see her, like if I'm really putting my like I pay $200 a session for therapy, right? So I should be learning something. And so I'm like, if I'm really putting my skills to work, there's just trauma there. And what trauma could have resulted in this clutch your purse, never put your head down for anybody woman? And a lot of what I came to it was just like, there's fear, and there's a lot of fear of being treated like less than or being seen less than. So not acting like very, just like I did it better. Trust me, you don't know, you might not see it, but I have to believe that I did better and I did the best that I could. And that deconstruction of that was very healing also for me in my relationship with her.
Yeah. And yeah, like seeing that there is that tenderness, right? The rough around the edges, which is of course a callback to your previous book, that inside there's this tender heart, and it's very difficult to see. And you know, of course, I'm sure you've seen this on social media, like check on your strong friend, you know, like actually check on your strong friend, because she may not be as strong as she's perceived. And so I kind of love that tenderness. And for all of us that might see ourselves in this dignified woman, and the clutching your purse, and the I'm gonna judge you, la criticona, you know, there's underneath there could be something else going on. I love that. I wondered if you would be open to reading a little bit from your book.
Okay. I don't know.
I can tell you where.
Yes, tell me.
So it's in the chapter Tu Tía La Loca, page 70. And starting with there's the quote there from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and all the way to the next quote. I think that part resonated. I think it'll resonate with a lot of us that see ourselves sometimes as tu tía la loca.
What part do I read?
So page 70 at the top, all the way to the Simone de Beauvoir
Okay.
quote.
So. You have avenged yourself by having been, through no fault of your own, a handful to raise, and an eternal thorn on their sides. And that's a quote from Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Today, mi mami says she does not recognize me. She doesn't know where I came from, but I look oddly like mi papi's clone. So birth, family, deniability is out of the question. However, if she paid any attention to how people spoke about me growing up, if she dared to put those pieces together, she would know that I was always this person, a wild woman, someone who cannot be restrained. As a kid, I was called la tocadita al mal, the black sheep. I was reminded constantly that I was different because I kept insisting and I kept asking for too much. And one day I spun myself out of their reach. Your tía la loca might give off the impression that she is strong like a dignified woman. So a reference to another chapter. In fact, she has a tinge of it, but dignified women are not impressed by her, yet they share more in common than we all dare to admit. The difference is that a dignified woman functions even as a potential matriarch in relationship with the patriarchy, consistently pushing towards heterosexual marriage and motherhood as a pinnacle of womanhood. A dignified woman shows restraint, and la loca runs from it. This all might make you believe that la loca is unbelievably durable, and she is not. No one is, She hears all the jokes at her expense. She hears all the comments. The eye rolls when she begins to speak make her own skin crawl. It all makes her want to hide. It has that effect. It has the effect it is meant to have. It's meant to shame and force someone to bend the knee, but transforming herself into someone more palatable feels like dying. And she rebuffs because she has witnessed her own lifelessness before, and she does not want to return to that form. That is where she might be seen as strong. But one day, she may stop wanting to fight and might disappear as you all wish her to. The ones you will harm along the way are all the primes who are watching these events unfold. Maybe once they kill her, their blood-stained hands will make them see what they have done to her, to women like her, to women who are difficult. Difficult as in not easily impressed by men. Difficult as in having standards. Difficult as in hopeful for something better for herself and those around her. Difficult as in not easily domesticated. Difficult as in she questions tradition. Difficult as in she asks more questions than we're prepared to answer. Difficult as in bigger than life. Difficult as in not submissive because she's supposed to be. Difficult as in mouthy. Difficult as in brilliant as fuck. And imagine wanting to eliminate that and not running to worship the very ground she walks on. Imagine thinking that the solution is that she must be controlled.
Love it. May we all be difficult women. I think it's very empowering, and I appreciate you reading that for us. I think it's a wonderful example of what folks can expect in this book.
It's so wild reading it because I also haven't done the audiobook. It's one of those things when you write a book and you're like, wow, who was that?
You're like, oh my God, I wrote that.
Yeah, like I'll make myself cry sometime.
That's great. That's amazing. And you know, because it's I'm sure it speaks to, like, you know, who's watching, right? Who's watching these women? When we destroy these women, when we destroy La Loca, it's not just a detriment to La Loca, but it's to all the little girls that identify with her. I'm like, oh no, is that what I'm destined to be? And so in this book, you're giving testament to, like, we're all watching. We were all little girls. We were all watching. And now you've given some language to what we were watching, the forces behind it, and why we need to show some love to each of these women. Yeah. I love it. I think that's really what's captured in this book. Okay, just to conclude, this is it. Nada que ver con el libro, but in a way, it does a little bit have to do with the book, because there's also this idea of archetypes and like, you know, generalizations of the women and Latinas in our world. You know, a few years ago, it was very common to see on BuzzFeed and Me Too this caricature of La Chola or Chonga. Mm-hmm. And I remember you were critical of it then. And luckily, that stuff sort of died down. You don't see it as much anymore. But there's been recent news about there's going to be a Chonga TV show. So yeah. I'm curious about your thoughts on this.
I mean, I think my thoughts haven't wavered. And I think it is unfortunate that we're still relying on that those are the shows that get greenlit in Hollywood. Like, we know people are pitching. I know Latinas are pitching, but things like Gordita Chronicles get canceled. But a Chonga show is greenlit and is gonna get made by two more white passing Latinas who've appropriated this very black and brown Latina reality in South Florida for profit. And I think it sucks. I know that I haven't been quiet about it in my critiques about it, but it doesn't matter because that's kind of what I say at the beginning of the book. Through Hollywood, we've absorbed ourselves into like very limiting ways. We've like absorbed this information and been like, I'm either a sexy Latina, a chola or chonga, or I'm the maid. And we like allow them to tell us that that's all we can be. And so much of writing this book is like, no, we're so much more complicated and bigger and funnier and meaner and so many other things, but we're so much more than they can ever comprehend. But they lack the imagination. But they're the ones greenlighting these shows, so they're gonna continue to greenlight these shows.
Yes, you've given us 20 examples, right? 20 examples of the multitudes that we carry. Sometimes we're more than one of these women. Many times we embody these women at different stages in our lives. So I hope that more shows that depict that nuance are the ones that are greenlit. And two, I think another subject that's part of this book is just thinking about, race and class. And as you mentioned, like the women that are going to be acting in these shows, they're not from that group, but also it's like they're also not only racially, like the skin tone, but clearly middle class, right? Like, so there's so much in going on in these projects. Well, with all of this, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I hope that this is just a conversation piece. That's what I want to be in the grand scheme of like what is Latinidad and how do we survive all these systems and how do we make it. I just want to contribute to the conversation and get people excited to talk about things I love when people disagree. I love when people are like, no, not that. What about this? I think that I want people to think and I want people to grow and I want our communities to just like have these type of critical conversations of what is happening instead of them happening about us. So I hope y'all read it and love it or hate it. I hope it sparks something.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for being that bridge, right? That bridge from our experiences to academia in a way that feels accessible and relatable, because we need more of that. We need a lot more of that. And that's how we can begin to push against all those forces that are referenced here. Well, thank you so much, Prisca. We're so excited to get folks to read the book, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
That was such a great conversation. So y'all, here's Tías and Primas. Pick it up. It is a great book. And also, if you haven't yet, pick up Prisca's first book, because you'll also enjoy that. That is called For Brown Girls with Sharp Edges and Tender Hearts. So pick up both the books, really great. Or gift them. These are perfect gifts especially for the young Latinas in your life. Give them this book. I think it's a fabulous book to gift. All right, so now time for our closing. Besides this great book, Getting a Matraca, what else is Getting a Matraca? We'll start with you, Delsy. What is your celebration for the week?
I just want to celebrate all of the people behind the scenes at the Democratic National Convention. I know that you know this, Brenda, you and I share this, and that we work in like event-based work. And I can only imagine the countless hours and logistics management of booking people and all the things that it requires to do something like this at this scale with so many cameras watching, something that is so important to the future of our nation. And so I'm sure that maybe they don't get enough recognition, but all of the people who kind of worked to get the DNC off the ground, matracas to you.
Yes, and all the staffers. I know I have a couple of friends out there that I catch glimpses of them in the as the camera pans, and then I'm following them on in their socials and the stories. They're like so stressed out, like dealing with so much. Not to mention the security. So yes, matraca to everybody behind the scenes on big events. We know it's a lot of work. Speaking of big events, so my matraca, I'm going to use it to promote something, but it's my matracas to my husband Jeff, because he is just so supportive, so awesome. I love that if I cook, he'll wash the dishes, and if I have a crazy idea, he'll come and do it. He'll come and support. So this is one of those. So listeners of this pod know that I teach a couple workout classes, and there's gonna be a special event. I want to invite you all. So this is September 29th here in Los Angeles. It is in person. September 29th at 11 a.m. It's called Sip and Sweat, because you're going to be sweating, but then you are sipping. The order is different, but it just doesn't sound so great to say sweat and sip. So sip and sweat. So after the workout, there's going to be wine tasting, chilled wine, because you want something refreshing. So this event is, again, September 29th at 11 a.m. It is $33 for folks that are not members of the gym. The gym is called Heartbeat House, or it's $22 if you are a member of the gym. And I mentioned Jeff, my husband, because he's going to DJ live. So he's DJing. I'm teaching the workout class, and then there's wine. And we've done this once before. It was so much fun. So we're ready to do this again. And this is my invitation to all of you. We'll have the link to this this already. It's already there in our link in bio on all the socials, but of course we'll hyperlink it to the notes of this episode. So yeah, that's my my sneaky promo by way of Matraca.
I love it. It makes me want to go. It's so exciting.
Oh yes, please do. It'll be so fun. All right, so now what is your basura for you?
Well, this has been going on for some time since June, but we haven't really mentioned it on the show. 2 NASA astronauts, Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams, have been kind of stuck aboard the International Space Station since June. I hate to use the word stuck because I know that NASA has been working really hard to
unstuck them,
to really kind of damage control a little bit of the language. And I certainly don't want to be part of spreading misinformation. But from what I understand, they were only supposed to be there, I think, 8 days, and have been kind of unable to leave because they feel that the craft has some engineering challenges that they think would maybe not result in them getting home safely. So they are kind of working day in and day out in the International Space Station while somebody comes up with a way to send them home. And I can't even imagine, Brenda.
Oh my God. They better write some books. They better write so many books after this.
What might be going through their minds, pero también to do a mission this long, you need a lot of training and a lot of mental health support, and they were not ready. So you're just basura to that, and I really hope they come home soon.
Yeah, I hope that they can get zoomed into some therapy because, oh my gosh, yes. Okay, basura to that. I agree with that one. I don't really have another good one other than literal basura. There's a lot of basura in my neighborhood, so... But it's sad. It's sad. So there's a street by my house that has a lot of RVs, and I got to give it to the residents of those RVs. They do keep them quite organized. They've painted them. They look nice. They don't look bad on the street, but it looks like they've been forced to move, and so now there's a lot of trash that's left behind. So it's just, another visible reminder of the failings of our ability to provide affordable housing and other supports to people in need. So that's my basura.
Okay.
All right.
Wow.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, I think we need to do better with policies because when we think about these folks and the fact that they're not there anymore, all I can think about is like, where have they been moved to? Where have they had to go? And how those communities are impacted, how they're impacted. And so we need to do better. Yeah,
we definitely need to do better. And this is another example why we need to vote, because the Supreme Court basically upheld this notion that people can't, that governments and cities can just outlaw being homeless. So is in essence what's happening. So it's a mess. It is a mess. All right. But to counter that, what is your inspiración for the week?
Okay, so I went to see Alanis Morissette.
Oh my gosh. Great choice.
Went with my sisters, so it was kind of, like a girls' event. We went, the three of us. We were all kind of living in different places. We had people taking flights, trying to meet up to go see Alanis, and we just sang our hearts out. And it was something like the level of nostalgia was incredible, but also Alanis, unbelievable performer, really.
Unbelievable
tier performer, lots of soul, incredible vocal range, really fun to watch, and you can tell she loves it.
Yes, she's even better. She sounds even better.
She sounds even better. And
even better than the CD,
Even better. And Joan Jett was opening for her, so it was just all fantastic. And I just had a great time. So, inspiración, thank you, Alanis, for your years of service.
Yes. Oh my gosh, she's the best. Absolutely the best. Glad you got to rock out. I experienced seeing her live last year, and it was wonderful. Or a couple years ago, not very long ago, and it was just amazing. So I'm so happy to see people going again. All right, so my inspiración, speaking of creative people, is Claudia Respeto. She is a person that you all are going to get to meet soon because she's going to be a future guest. But I watched, in anticipation for this conversation with Claudia, I watched the romantic comedy Peak Season. And I say in quotation mark comedy because, to me it was more like a dramedy. There is some comedy, but really it's I felt it, in my heart. It's a very good and touching film that really gets you like fully immersed into a world, which is, I know, something that both you and I love in storytelling, when we just feel like we're totally there. And I can't tell you how at the end I was like, oh man, I'm like, my heart hurt at the end. Like I felt the entire relationship. So you all need to see this movie called Peak Season. And just, I love it when women are behind projects. You could tell. And it's great. All right, so that's the end of this episode. Lots for you all to read and watch and attend and listen to. So I hope you all enjoyed this. We have been happy to be back in your ears. It's been a lot of work already. Lots of work already. Lots of good conversations. But we'll see you until the next episode. All right, so until next time, ponte un suéter.
Y saludos a la familia.
Ciao. Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Delsy Sandoval. We are also the show's executive producers. Jeff Ricards wrote our theme song. Sonoro Media's Karina Riveroll provides production support, and Clivia Torres edits our episodes for YouTube. The best way to support our work is to rate and review Tamarindo or share an episode with a friend. Get in touch with us at tamarindopodcast.com.